If we were to leave, our friends in the world would consider us diminished. Departure would be a gratuitous act of self-harm. The economic argument for Europe seems to me to be overwhelming. It's nearly half our export market, 5 times bigger than the market of all the 52 Commonwealth countries added together, and 6 times more than the sum total of trade with Brazil, Russia, India, and China. In the European Union, we have unimpeded access to the richest trade market the world has ever seen, right here on our doorstep. And access to that market of 500 million people encourages a wall of investment to come into the United Kingdom. Ask yourself this simple question. If you were an overseas investor, would you be more likely to invest in a British market of 65 million people, or in Britain as the access point to a European market of 500 million people? To ask the question is to know the answer. And that investment isn't just an abstract statistic. It's jobs, it's tax yield, it's profits, and it's a contribution to our public services and our overall quality of life. Outside Europe, outside the European Union, we'd still have to comply with EU rules and regulations unless we surrendered all access to the single market, which all reputable authorities, not least the IMF, the OECD, the Institute of Economic and Social Research, the Bank of England, and many others, all regard as economically foolish. And once out of Europe, or liberated in the more emotive language of the Leave campaign, we could no longer protect ourselves against the impact of European laws on the City of London, nor on our industries and service sectors. Nominally, we would indeed be free, but in practice, we would only be free to accept whatever the European Union determined, with no power as a non-member to argue against it. Is that taking back control as the Leave campaign describes it? No, it isn't. And it's not glorious sovereignty either. It's nothing other than reckless, imprudent folly. And the price for that would be paid by every single British family in our country. And it isn't the only price. The Institute of Economic and Social Research warns us of a collapse in the value of sterling. The LSE warns of higher prices. The Bank of England fears higher mortgage rates and mortgages. All this and more from a whole range of independent bodies. There is no independent body that has suggested otherwise than this. All that and more is ignored and brushed aside by the Leave campaign. And yet, many people, not least in my own party, wish us to leave Europe. Their motives are many and variable, and they're often good motives. Pride in our country, concern over sovereignty and immigration, fear that we have no influence in Europe and are heading for a federal structure. And we need to address those instincts, those emotions, and debunk the myths that are simply wrong, but nonetheless sunk in our national consciousness. And if we fail to do so, we may end up leaving Europe because of absurd falsehoods that are widely believed to be true. One absurdity is that this country, subsumed in Europe, would lose its traditions, its heritage, its individuality. Well, we won't. After 60 years of Europe, are the French less French? Are the Germans less German? I think not, and nor will we be less British. In the search for voter support, the Leave campaign repeatedly overstate their case. If they were to win, they risk a backlash from those who might then reasonably say that they were misled by their campaign. There is no shortage of their exaggerations. One clear example, of course, is the cost of Europe. Mr. Farage, Mr. Duncan Smith, and Mr. Johnson all put it as £20 billion a year. It's even on Boris's battle bus. Michael Gove is a little more modest at 18 billion. A touch of disagreement there. All of which, we are told by the Leave campaign, all of which, if only we were free of Europe, could be spent on the health service and in particular our hospitals. If only. If only. But the truth is their figures are wrong by a factor of 3. During the last 5 years, the average gross payment was not 20 billion, but just over 12 billion, of which 5.5 billion was paid back to us. Last year, our gross payment had fallen because the budget was cut, partly as a result of the Prime Minister's interventions. So the gross payment for the last year we have figures was just over 11 billion, of which over 5 billion was paid back to our farmers, our businesses, science, research, and regional aid. Some of it came here to Oxford. Now, that isn't my calculation. That is the calculation of the Institute of Fiscal Studies. So to put the 20 billion more into hospitals that the Leave campaign promised daily, they would have to claw back all that money paid to our fellow countrymen. Good luck with that, with the farmers and the researchers. And then on top of that, tax the nation by an additional 10 billion or so. And I think those who make such demonstrably false claims, knowingly do so, need to apologize that they have got their figures so badly wrong and stop peddling a clear-cut untruth. They have repeatedly been asked to do so by the chairman of the UK Statistics Authority, and still they have failed to comply.